For years, PC gamers have been told that Windows is not merely the default choice, but the only realistic choice. You could complain about forced updates, background services, account requirements, privacy concerns, driver confusion, or the growing amount of software built into Windows. But when it was time to launch a major game, connect a controller, install a graphics driver, or use an online service, most players returned to the same conclusion. Windows was inconvenient but unavoidable. SteamOS 3.8 may be the first version of Valve's gaming operating system that seriously challenges that assumption. It does not mean Windows is finished, and it does not mean every gamer should erase Windows tonight. What it means is more interesting. For a growing number of PC gamers, Windows may finally become optional rather than mandatory. That is a major shift because the real competition is no longer about which operating system has more features on a comparison chart. It is about whether you can sit down, turn on your gaming PC, open your Steam library, play the games you care about, use the hardware you already own, and stop thinking about the operating system. SteamOS 3.8 moves closer to that goal than previous versions because Valve is no longer treating SteamOS only as software for one handheld device. The platform is expanding toward living room computers, desktop gaming systems, and additional SteamOS hardware. The question is no longer whether Linux gaming can work. The question is whether SteamOS can make the Windows experience unnecessary for enough players to change the direction of PC gaming. That possibility matters because Windows has held its position through an enormous network of compatibility rather than through universal affection. Game developers build for Windows because most PC gamers use Windows. Hardware companies prioritize Windows because most customers use Windows. Anti-cheat providers, launchers, mod tools, capture utilities, and peripheral software follow the same market. That creates a cycle that is extremely difficult for any alternative operating system to break. A new platform needs games before it can attract users, but developers want users before they invest in games. Valve has spent years attacking that problem from the opposite direction. Instead of waiting for thousands of developers to create native Linux versions, Valve built Proton into the Steam experience. Proton allows many Windows games to run on Linux by translating the technologies those games expect into technologies the Linux system can use. For the player, the important part is not the technical translation. The important part is that a Windows game can often be installed from the same Steam library with the same button and launched without a complicated manual setup. That simple experience changed Linux gaming more than any argument about open source software ever could. SteamOS 3.8 builds on that foundation. It takes the progress created by Steam Deck, Proton, Steam input, shader processing, controller profiles, and Valve's compatibility testing, then pushes the same idea toward a wider range of gaming PCs. Windows does not need to disappear for this to be successful. SteamOS only needs to become reliable enough that millions of players can stop needing Windows for their normal gaming routine. The biggest reason SteamOS 3.8 feels different is that Valve is treating the operating system as part of a broader hardware platform rather than a special image locked to the Steam Deck. Valve now describes compatibility across Steam Deck, Steam Machine, and other supported SteamOS devices. That may sound like a branding detail, but it changes the incentives for developers. A developer is no longer optimizing only for one handheld with one screen, one performance target, and one set of controls. The same compatibility work can benefit a handheld, a living room Steam machine, and a third-party SteamOS gaming device. Valve's current review system can present separate compatibility information for different categories of SteamOS hardware, while still using overlapping standards for controller support, launchers, text input, and Proton behavior. This gives game studios a clearer target. It also gives customers a more useful answer than the vague question, does this game run on Linux? A game might run perfectly on a powerful living room PC, struggle on a handheld, or require manual steps because of a launcher. A mature platform needs to communicate those differences honestly. SteamOS 3.8 is important, not because a version number magically fixes every problem, but because the platform around that version is becoming more organized. Valve is building a path where hardware makers can ship SteamOS devices, developers can test against recognizable standards, and players can see what kind of experience to expect before downloading a game. That is how an alternative stops feeling experimental and starts feeling like a normal consumer choice. For desktop gamers, the most exciting change is also the one that requires the most caution. Valve has opened a clearer route for installing the SteamOS code used by its gaming hardware on personal living room computers, but current official graphics support is centered on AMD GPUs. That means the dream is real, but it is not yet universal. If your gaming PC uses a recent AMD graphics card and compatible hardware, SteamOS 3.8 is much closer to being a practical official option. If you use an Nvidia GPU, you should not assume that every part of the experience will behave exactly like Valve's supported configurations. Valve has said it is working to expand support, which is encouraging, but future support is not the same as complete support today. This distinction matters because many gaming channels will reduce the story to a dramatic claim that SteamOS now works on every PC. That is not the responsible conclusion. The responsible conclusion is that Valve has crossed an important line. SteamOS is moving from device-specific software toward an operating system that ordinary users can consider for their own gaming machines, starting with a narrower hardware range. The correct question for a PC gamer is not simply, can I download it? The correct questions are whether your GPU is supported, whether your wireless hardware works, whether your display features behave properly, whether your favorite games are compatible, and whether the applications you use outside Steam have acceptable alternatives. SteamOS can make Windows optional, but only after your personal requirements are checked. The hardware limitation also explains why SteamOS has a better chance of succeeding through focused systems before it succeeds on every random desktop. Windows supports an enormous combination of processors, graphics cards, motherboards, sound devices, wireless adapters, accessories, monitors, and old components. That flexibility is one of its greatest strengths, but it also creates complexity. Valve can deliver a smoother experience when the hardware target is known. The Steam Deck proved this. Developers know the controls, screen, processor, graphics architecture, memory limits, and performance expectations. Valve can test updates against that exact device. A living room Steam machine follows the same philosophy at a higher performance level. Third-party manufacturers can also design around supported components. A self-built SteamOS PC is more open, but every additional hardware combination introduces another opportunity for a driver issue, sleep problem, audio failure, display bug, or firmware conflict. SteamOS 3.8 does not eliminate that reality. Instead, it creates a more realistic middle ground. You can have the openness of PC hardware while choosing parts that align with Valve's supported path. For many gamers, that is enough. They want a modern AMD gaming PC connected to a monitor or television, a controller that works immediately, a clean game library, reliable sleep and wake behavior, and access to most of their Steam collection. That is a much more achievable target, and it is the target that could make Windows optional first. Then there is the interface, which may be SteamOS's strongest advantage over Windows for a dedicated gaming system. Windows is a general-purpose desktop operating system. It must serve office workers, schools, businesses, engineers, creators, gamers, and millions of users who never open Steam. That is why the experience begins with a desktop, a taskbar, windows, notifications, background applications, and layers of settings. SteamOS begins from the opposite direction. Gaming mode is designed around a controller and a game library. It feels closer to a console because the interface assumes the machine exists primarily to play games. You can browse your library, manage downloads, change performance options, connect accessories, chat with friends, access the Steam store, and launch games without reaching for a mouse. This matters more than enthusiasts sometimes admit. A powerful gaming PC in a bedroom can tolerate desktop friction. A living room PC connected to a television cannot. Nobody wants to balance a keyboard on a sofa just to dismiss a pop-up, enter a password, or find a hidden setting. SteamOS makes the computer feel like a gaming appliance while preserving access to desktop mode when you need a traditional environment. That combination is powerful. It offers the immediate usability of a console and the flexibility of a PC. Windows can imitate parts of this experience through big picture mode and startup settings, but SteamOS controls the complete software stack. The system can boot directly into the experience Valve designed, with fewer layers competing for attention. This is where the word optional becomes more important than the word replacement. A replacement must do everything the old system does for everyone. An option only needs to satisfy a meaningful group of users. SteamOS does not need to replace Windows for competitive players, whose main games use unsupported anti-cheat systems. It does not need to replace Windows for creators who depend on specific Adobe applications, professional audio tools, specialized engineering software, or hardware utilities that exist only for Windows. It does not need to replace Windows for every modding workflow or every subscription service. It needs to become good enough for the person who primarily plays single-player games, independent games, emulators, cooperative titles, controller-focused games, and compatible multiplayer releases through Steam. That group is not small. Many gaming PCs are already used almost like consoles. Their owners spend most of their time inside Steam, use cloud saves, connect a controller, and rarely need Windows itself. For those players, the operating system is not the product. It is a layer between the power button and the game. If SteamOS makes that layer faster, cleaner, and easier to control, the reason to stay with Windows becomes weaker. The moment enough users realize that their personal library already works, the psychological barrier changes. Linux gaming no longer feels like giving up compatibility for principles. It begins to feel like choosing a gaming-focused operating system because it offers a better daily experience. game compatibility remains the center of the entire argument. SteamOS 3.8 can have a beautiful interface, quick updates, efficient resource use, and excellent controller integration, but none of that matters if the games people want refuse to launch. Proton is the technology that makes the possibility real. It is a compatibility system developed for the Steam client that enables many games built for Windows to run on Linux. Over time, updates to Proton, Wine, graphics translation layers, codecs, and the Steam Linux runtime have expanded the number of games that work. Valve can also update Proton separately from a complete operating system release, which means compatibility can improve without waiting for SteamOS 3, 9, or another major version. A game that fails today may work after a Proton update, a developer patch, an anti-cheat configuration change, or a launcher fix. This creates a platform that can improve continuously. However, compatibility should not be described as magic. Some games run perfectly. Some require a different Proton version or a launch option. Some have broken videos, unstable performance, launcher problems, or unsupported online components. Some do not work at all. The correct way to evaluate SteamOS is not by asking whether every Windows game works. Even Windows has games that crash, old titles that require fixes, and launchers that fail. The better question is whether the games you actually play work well enough that Windows is no longer necessary. That answer is increasingly yes for many users, but it remains no for others. Anti-cheat support is the hardest obstacle because it is not purely a technical performance problem that Valve can solve alone. Many competitive games use anti-cheat systems that operate deeply within Windows or depend on publisher decisions about supported platforms. Some anti-cheat technologies can work with Proton when developers enable and test the necessary support, but the existence of that capability does not guarantee that every publisher will use it. A game can run beautifully in a single-player mode and still block access to its online servers. This is why a player who spends every evening in one competitive title must research that title before switching. The rest of a library can be perfect, but one unsupported main game may be enough to keep a Windows installation. This does not mean SteamOS has failed. It means gaming habits are personal. For one user, SteamOS can replace nearly everything. For another, one anti-cheat decision controls the entire operating system choice. The encouraging part is that Valve's growing hardware ecosystem increases the business reason for developers to support SteamOS. A publisher may ignore a small group of desktop Linux users, but it becomes harder to ignore Steam Deck owners, Steam Machine customers, third-party SteamOS devices, and self-built SteamOS PCs as one combined audience. Every additional device strengthens the same compatibility target. That is how the platform can move from asking publishers for special Linux support to presenting SteamOS support as a normal part of serving PC gamers. Performance is another area where expectations need to stay realistic. You will hear claims that SteamOS makes every game faster than Windows, and you will hear opposite claims that translating Windows games through Proton must always reduce performance. Neither statement is reliable across an entire library. Results depend on the game engine, graphics API, driver, shader behavior, processor, GPU, memory configuration, resolution, and Proton version. Some games can perform similarly to Windows. Some may perform better in particular situations. Others may lose performance, show more stutter, or have features that behave differently. SteamOS's practical advantage is not a guaranteed frame rate victory in every benchmark. Its advantage is that Valve can optimize the complete gaming experience around a focused software stack. Gaming mode can expose frame rate limits, performance overlays, display options, controller settings, and system controls in one interface. Background behavior can be designed around games rather than business applications. Updates can be tested for the target platform. On fixed hardware, developers can choose sensible defaults. Valve's compatibility requirements for its gaming hardware even define minimum playable performance expectations for reviewed titles. This does not turn weak hardware into a high-end machine, but it can reduce the friction between installing a game and finding a usable experience. For ordinary players, consistency can matter more than winning a benchmark by 5 frames per second. A system that launches reliably, resumes correctly, recognizes the controller, uses the right display mode, and keeps performance stable may feel better even when the average frame rate is similar. SteamOS also changes the economics of building a console like PC. The result often felt like a desktop pretending to be a console. SteamOS 3.8 makes the opposite approach possible. The machine can begin as a gaming appliance and reveal its desktop capabilities only when needed. A builder can choose a compact case, an AMD processor or graphics card, quiet cooling, fast storage, and a controller, then create a system that boots into Steam. This could encourage small manufacturers and system integrators to sell gaming PCs that feel consistent without developing their own operating system. It could also give consumers more price and performance choices than a single official box. One person might build a low-cost system for independent games and emulation. Another might create a powerful television gaming computer. Another could reuse an older compatible AMD desktop. The operating system becomes a common layer across different hardware tiers. That is important because Windows has never had a serious gaming-focused competitor with Valve's store, library developer relationships, input system, cloud features, and compatibility investment behind it. SteamOS is not simply another Linux distribution. It is Valve using the scale of Steam to turn Linux into a consumer gaming platform. The Steam library itself is one of Valve's greatest advantages. Most PC gamers do not want to rebuild their collection on a new platform. They do not want to repurchase games, recreate friend lists, move achievements, or abandon cloud saves. SteamOS avoids that problem because it is built around the same account and library players already use on Windows. When you sign in, your games remain your games. Compatible titles can be installed from the familiar store and library. Purchases made on another device appear across the account. Cloud saves can allow progress to move between a Steam Deck, Steam Machine, SteamOS desktop, and Windows PC when the game supports proper synchronization. This continuity lowers the cost of trying an alternative operating system. A player can test SteamOS without leaving the Steam ecosystem. That makes dual booting especially significant. Someone can keep Windows for a few unsupported games or work applications while using SteamOS for the majority of gaming. Over time, as Proton improves and habits change, the Windows partition may be used less often. That is how Windows can become optional gradually rather than through one dramatic switch. Valve does not need every user to delete Windows on day one. It benefits whenever more gaming time happens inside SteamOS. The platform can grow through convenience, not ideology. That may be the most powerful strategy. Because most consumers do not choose operating systems to support a philosophy. They choose the system that gets them into their games with the least trouble. Desktop mode is what prevents SteamOS from being just a console interface. Behind gaming mode is a traditional Linux desktop environment that can run a browser, file manager, communication tools, media applications, emulators, and many other programs. This gives advanced users room to customize the system, install additional software, manage files, connect storage, and perform normal computer tasks. It also introduces complexity. Software availability is not identical to Windows. Some applications have native Linux versions, some work through web interfaces, some have community alternatives, and some Windows applications can be difficult or impossible to reproduce. Peripheral utilities can be another limitation. A mouse, keyboard, headset, fan controller, lighting system, capture device, or racing accessory may function at a basic level, while its official configuration software remains Windows only. Anyone considering SteamOS as the only operating system on a main computer must examine these details. A dedicated gaming PC is easier because the list of required applications is shorter. A combined work and gaming machine is more complicated. This is another reason SteamOS may make Windows optional first in the living room. A device under a television does not need every productivity program. It needs games, streaming, voice chat, media playback, controllers, storage, and reliable display output. SteamOS can focus on those tasks while a laptop or separate desktop handles work. As support expands, the boundary may move, but the strongest case today is a gaming-first system rather than a universal computer for every profession. The good news is that you can evaluate the change without gambling your entire computer. Start with your actual library, not a list of famous games chosen to prove a point. Identify the 10 or 20 titles you play most often. Check Valve's compatibility information and recent reports for each one. Pay special attention to online games, launchers, anti-cheat systems, downloadable content, controller support, and cloud saves. Then list the applications and devices you use while gaming. Include voice chat, recording software, streaming tools, browser extensions, wheel software, headset controls, RGB utilities, and mod managers. This process may sound less exciting than declaring that Windows is dead, but it produces the answer that matters. If nearly everything is supported, SteamOS becomes a serious option. If two essential items fail, consider dual booting. If half your routine depends on Windows, wait and watch the platform improve. SteamOS 3.8 is valuable even for people who are not ready to switch because it creates a clear direction. Each update, new hardware partner, Proton release, compatibility review, and developer fix can remove another reason to depend on Windows. The platform does not need to be perfect today to change the future. It needs to show that the compatibility gap is closing while the user experience becomes more attractive. There is still a danger that enthusiasm moves faster than reality. New users may install SteamOS on unsupported hardware, encounter a black screen or missing network connection, and conclude that the entire platform is broken. Others may expect every Windows game to run, then discover that their favorite competitive title blocks Linux. Some may follow a tutorial that was created for a different device or an older image. Others may erase a drive without protecting important files. SteamOS becoming official on more hardware does not remove the need for preparation. back up your data, confirm the current support requirements, understand whether the installation will replace existing partitions, prepare recovery media, record your Windows license information if necessary, verify cloud saves and local save locations. Keep a keyboard available during setup, even if the final system will use a controller. Start with a secondary machine or separate drive when possible. These steps are not evidence that SteamOS is unsuitable. They are normal precautions when changing an operating system. The difference is that a successful installation can now lead to a polished gaming environment rather than a hobby project that demands constant terminal work. Valve's challenge is to make the official process simple enough that ordinary PC gamers can reach that result without becoming Linux experts. The long-term impact may be larger than the number of people who install SteamOS 3.8 this month. Hardware makers are watching. Game developers are watching. Anti-cheat companies are watching. Microsoft is watching. If Valve demonstrates that SteamOS can deliver a consistent experience across handhelds, living room systems, third-party devices, and selected desktop hardware, the market will respond. Manufacturers could offer certified SteamOS computers at different prices. Developers could include SteamOS testing earlier in production. Accessory companies could provide Linux configuration tools. Anti-cheat support could become a standard launch requirement rather than an optional request. Graphics vendors could treat SteamOS support as a selling point. None of these changes is guaranteed, but platforms grow when businesses see customers gathering around them. Steam Deck created the first large visible audience. SteamOS 3.8 extends the idea beyond one handheld. That expansion is the real story. The operating system is no longer valuable only because it powers Valve's device. It is becoming a product that can shape other gaming hardware. Once that happens, Windows is no longer protected solely by the absence of a coordinated competitor. So, could SteamOS 3.8 finally make Windows optional for PC gamers? For every PC gamer, no. For Nvidia owners seeking complete official support today, the answer requires patience. For players tied to unsupported anti-cheat games, Windows remains necessary. For professionals who need specific Windows applications, SteamOS is not a complete replacement. For users with complex modding setups and proprietary accessories, more research is required. But for a growing group of gamers with compatible AMD hardware, a Steam-focused library, controller-based gaming habits, and games that work through Proton, the answer is becoming yes. That is not a theoretical future. It is a practical option whose limits can be checked today. The most important result is choice. You do not need to join a platform war. You do not need to hate Windows or pretend SteamOS has no problems. You can choose Windows for the games and tools that require it, and choose SteamOS for the experience it delivers better. You can dual boot. You can test SteamOS on a separate drive. You can build a dedicated living room PC. You can wait for broader GPU support. You can decide that your current setup already works and simply watch the competition improve. Optional means the decision belongs to you. For decades, PC gaming freedom mostly referred to choosing hardware, graphics settings, stores, and accessories while the operating system remained effectively fixed. SteamOS 3.8 begins to extend that freedom to the operating system itself. That would be a historic change. Before you make any decision, look at your own games rather than the loudest claims. Check the titles you play every week. Check your GPU, check your controller, headset, monitor, and extra software. Decide whether you need a full replacement or simply a dedicated gaming environment. SteamOS 3.8 does not win because someone says Windows is dead. It wins when a normal gamer turns on a PC, chooses a game, plays for hours, suspends the system, returns later, and realizes that Windows was never needed during the entire experience. That quiet moment is more important than any benchmark or dramatic headline. It is the moment an operating system becomes optional. SteamOS is closer to creating that moment than it has ever been. If this shift continues, the next generation of PC gamers may see operating systems differently. They may buy a machine based on the experience they want, rather than accepting whatever platform traditionally came with a gaming computer. Some will choose Windows for maximum compatibility. Some will choose SteamOS for a focused console-like experience. Others will move between both without treating the decision as permanent. That kind of competition is exactly what PC gaming needs. SteamOS 3.8 is not the end of Windows, and it is not the end of Linux problems. It is the beginning of a more credible choice. And once users have a credible choice, every company involved has to work harder to earn their time. Tell me in the comments which games would prevent you from leaving Windows, and which games already work well enough that you could use SteamOS as your main gaming system. Also tell me whether you would install SteamOS on an existing AMD PC, build a new living room machine, or wait for official Nvidia support. Your answers will reveal more about the future of PC gaming than any single benchmark. Subscribe for more SteamOS 3.8 coverage, Linux gaming compatibility updates, Proton news, Windows alternatives, and practical tests focused on what actually matters to PC gamers. The operating system battle is no longer about theory. It is moving into real gaming rooms, real hardware builds, and real Steam libraries. Windows is still powerful, familiar, and deeply compatible, but for the first time in years, it may no longer be the only serious answer.